She sent for one of those squat, plump little cakes called petite madeleines, which look as though they had been molded in the fluted valve of a scallop shell, and soon, mechanically dispirited, after a dreary day with the prospect of a depressing morrow, I raised to my lips a spoonful of the tea in which I had soaked a morsel of the cake. No sooner had the warm liquid mixed with the crumbs touched my palate than a shiver ran through me, and I stopped, intent upon the extraordinary thing that was happening to me. An exquisite pleasure had invaded my senses, something isolated, detached, and with no suggestion of its origin. And as in the game wherein the Japanese amuse themselves by filling a porcelain bowl with water and steeping in it little pieces of paper, which until then are without character or form, but the moment they become wet, stretch and twist and take on color and distinctive shape, become flowers or houses or people, in our garden and in Monsieur Swan's park, and the water lilies on the Vivant, and the good folk of the village, and their little dwellings, and the parish church, and the whole of Combray and its surroundings, taking shape and solidity, sprang into being, town and garden alike, from my cup of tea. Hey everyone, Sebastian here, back again. I'm reading today a passage from Marcel Proust in Search of Lost Time. Not just any passage, the most famous passage in all of Proust's books, and one of the most famous passages in literature. I'm talking about the Madeleine scene in the book, and we are talking about what makes it such a powerful scene that is worthy of all the attention and all the references. You know, it comes up in Barbie, it comes up anytime people are remembering something in this visceral way. So if you've seen my other videos, you know I usually do SAT prep, but I think you can apply the engaging skills there to something like this, and you can apply this to that, and I want to sort of expand the things and have my students appreciate things besides just test prep. So we're going to go through this and talk about what's happening, what makes it such a beautiful passage. So first, right, let's start with the basics. What is happening in the first part is that he, as an adult, is coming and he's having these plump little cakes, right, called petite madeleines. And if you don't know what those are, they're these interesting French pastries that are, you know, they're pretty good. I've had them a couple times. I even dipped them in tea one time to see what Proust was talking about. They look like this. You know, you can see they make me think of seashells, just like he mentions, thinking of scallop shells. And they have these little ridges. They're moist. They have a sort of gentle flavor. They're not very heavy. They're not very sweet. But they're just like a very delicate, very nice flavor. And so they're almost like a cookie / little cake. He's dipping this as an adult. And what I think of, right, it feels kind of refined. It's petite madeleine. It's shaped like this. But what I think of when I read it as I think about dipping cookies in milk, right? A very basic thing that I think, at least in the US now, most kids have done at one point or another. He's doing that, right? So he's hearkening back to childhood when he's thinking about the madeleines in the tea. So that's just to start with it. Okay, so what happens, right, is he's sorted down. He's doing this mechanically. He's dispirited. The day's been dreary, and he has a depressing morrow, right? A depressing future. And he does this, and no sooner did the warm liquid mix and touch his palate than he had this extraordinary sensation, but he didn't really know what it meant or where it was coming from. And what is happening, right, is he's going back into the past. He's remembering when he would do this as a kid, and when he would do this as a kid at his aunt's house, when he would have this as a little treat. And then in the last part, I think the part that really makes the scene come alive is when he makes a simile between what the Japanese do with, you know, origami. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there's origami that you can dip in water, and then the water hydrates the paper and makes it unfold in a certain way. So you can see flowers bloom, or I've seen trees, flowers bloom, and it's really beautiful scene. So it's happening here, and that's the simile he's using, right? Dipping a madeleine in tea is compared to dipping not a cookie in milk, but this origami art into water. And I think that is what is the key to this passage, because it's a very physical connection, right? Dipping into water makes these two things come alive. And from there, he experiences this whole three-dimensional return of memory. So that is what's happening. And I think the simile is very important to understand that it's not just anything, right? It's not just putting color on a canvas or something like that. It's the physical act of dipping into water that he's making the connection. And from there, he makes this emotional and artistic and philosophical connection. What we have then to think about is the grammar. So in Proust, at least in the translated versions, this translation has been originally done by C.K. Scott Moncrief, and it was edited by Terence Kilmartin and then D.J. Enright. Think about how he extends certain passages and then he shortens them up. So in the first part, the first sentence is pretty straightforward. There's a couple commas, a parenthetical phrase, but it's not too complicated. And then he extends the moment of what's happening next. And soon, comma, mechanically, comma, dispirited after a dreary day with the prospect of depressing morrow, comma, I raised to my lips a spoonful of the tea in which I had soaked a morsel of cake. So he's extending the moment, expanding that moment. And he is building anticipation for this small act that the narrator does not realize is going to be a big moment, but in the future he does. And also he's depressed in the moment and he thinks the future is depressing, but the past revives him. That excites him. And often in Proust, the future and the past, normally both, are these exciting, very energizing things that give him hope. And in the moment, he's usually disappointed in something. So what you'll see is he's anticipating something, a performance or a meeting. He's getting excited. He's living a fantasy version of it. And then it occurs and he's let down. But then in his memory, he starts building it up again. And it is saved in memory. It comes alive in anticipation. It dies in the moment. And then it is resurrected in memory, which I think is, a very true thing to a lot of us and is done incredibly movingly in a lot of passages of Proust. And then here, right, when we look at the grammar in the second part, besides the very specific simile he's using, again, it's extended, right? This whole thing is just one sentence, but the grammar isn't very complicated. Sometimes there'll be clauses within clauses within clauses, and there is a little bit of that. But when we get to this part here, but the moment they become what? Stretch and twist and take on color and distinctive shape, become flowers or houses or people. In our garden and in Monsieur Swann's park, and the water lilies on the Vivonne, and the good folk of the village, and their little dwellings, and the parish church, and the whole of Cambrai, and its surroundings, taking shape and solidity, sprang into being, town and gardens alike, for my cup of tea. So I want you to notice how there's this sort of listing aspect that's happening. He's overcome in this moment, and just the way the blooming would occur on this dipped origami, right, where it's just sudden and one thing leads to the next. His thoughts are just sudden and one image leads to the next as it all fills up. Not complicated at all because it's an overwhelming kind of emotional connection he's having. And then he closes it off at the end by telling us exactly what's happening, taking shape and solidity, and then sprang into being for my cup of tea. So that's the very simple thing that's happening, but it's happening all of a sudden in this rush of memory that overtakes him and that often overtakes him in the book. And again, I think this is just an incredible moment in this book and in any book because it's capturing this childhood act and using that to expand all of childhood, right? So it's like you go home and you smell something from your childhood, whether it's a cake your mom used to bake or, some chicken that she would cook. And it brings back not just the smell, but all these circumstances around it. And that's what he's representing here. I think it's a very universal feeling and effect, and he just does it in a very specific way that I feel is true to the narrator, right? It's something that you could see happening. And all these things, Cambrai, Vivonne, Monsieur Park, this happens about 50 to 60 pages into the first book, into Swann's Way. So we know who those people are, but we still don't know them that well. And it builds onto this climax of feeling and memory that then will carry us into the next part of the book and really into the whole rest of the series. So, and if you're interested in this and if you like this writing, you should really give Proust a shot because I was telling somebody that he really feels to me in some ways like a fantasy writer, where he builds up this whole world of people that you just sort of want to spend time with, that he spent time with, and that you just want to know and you just enjoy what happens from scene to scene because of the writing being so beautiful and because the characters come to life the way, this paper comes to life in the water or the madeleine and the tea comes to life. So I'll be doing more videos like this from time to time. My focus will still obviously be on SAT prep for now, but I wanted to share this and show how you can engage with writing like this to open it up to yourself, and you can engage with things educationally in a way that isn't just about getting the best score on a test, but it's about appreciating things and being active in the world in your mind, even if you're not acting, doing something. You know, you could be reading, can be doing something. It's not a passive act, it can be active. So I'll be doing more like this, like I said. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have questions on this or thoughts that come from this passage, let me know. If you have other books that you love, that you think have great passages, let me know about that. I'd love to learn about any books like that. Otherwise, I hope it is sunny where you are, and if it's raining, I hope it's cleaning your windows and watering your plants. Bye.